Honestly guys, what you saw just there was better than the whole 2019 film. So I just got back from seeing The Lion King after paying an extortionate £13.75 to go see it at the Odeon. Seriously Odeon, £13.75. That's like 13 3/4 items I could have bought from Poundland, and I can guarantee any one of those items would have bought me more entertainment value than this film. Which I guess was the thought process of many other people. As the screen I was in, I would say only about 15% of the seats were taken, which considering this was a Friday showing at 5 PM on the first day of release in the UK, that's a shockingly low number. Not that I was complaining though, as it allowed me to move from my standard seat up to one of the many available premiere seats. Yeah, suck it Odeon, I win. Now let me just start off by saying that I'm actually not a huge hater of these live action remakes of classic Disney films, as even though they are in nowhere near comparable to the quality of the originals, they at least offer something different, like a twist on the old narrative or a new take on a character, just to spice things up a bit. Not always done for the better, but at least they try. This film is quite literally a 95% shot for shot remake of the original, with no detachment from the original narrative whatsoever. I was hoping they may bring focus on elements which got glossed over in the original, maybe a little more focus on how the pride slowly falls apart under Scar's rule and the suffering he brings to the land. Maybe a little more focus on Scar's backstory, growing up in the shadow of Mufasa. Disney seems to love this recent trend of making classic villains more complex and sympathetic, so why not take advantage of that with a character like Scar, who with a little exploration could actually be a deep and complex character. Show how he was always treated second best and why this led to him resenting his brother so much. Show us how because of that rejection, he found a mutual bond with the hyenas, who are also treated as second class citizens in the Pride Lands. Even show us some backstory of how he got his name. I can't imagine that was a name given to him the moment he was born, seeing as how it's highly unlikely that he was born with a scar on his head. Especially seeing as how the parents named the other child Mufasa, which quite literally translates into king. Like, if I was Scar and that was the case, yeah, I'd be pretty pissed off too. Compare this to the Jungle Book remake, which despite its flaws, at least changed up its narrative, borrowing more elements from the book, adding more focus to characters previously glossed over, and altering the traits of existing characters. Whether you loved or hated those changes, at least they tried something different. Narrative reasons aside though, there's another key issue as to why this film doesn't work as a shot for shot remake, and that's the fact that the CGI doesn't work for it. Now don't get me wrong, I will admit that the CGI is impressive, and the fur textures and backgrounds look incredibly realistic, so props to the team who did that. But that is also the issue, they went for an ultra realistic aesthetic, and that creates a lot of limitations. See, with 2D animation you have a lot of freedom in terms of design and stylization. Character proportions and facial expressions can change on a dime to represent emotions. Even the background can completely change its palette to convey a certain mood and create atmosphere. With a CGI remake that is going for a realism look, you don't have this flexibility. See, most animals in real life don't have expressive faces like humans do, as it's not a method in which they communicate emotion. So to keep a CGI animal looking realistic, you can't squash and stretch the face to express anger, sadness, or joy. It just wouldn't look right. As a result, the characters in this film hold pretty much the same expression throughout the entire film. When Simba is expressing joy, he looks like this. When Simba is expressing fear, he looks like this. When Simba is expressing sadness, he looks like this. You may have seen that scene that got leaked online which shows a comparison shot of Simba watching his father falling to his death. In the animated film he displays a look of absolute terror. In the remake, he looks like a cat simply meowing for a bowl of milk. Honestly, that clip I showed at the start of this review offered Simba more emotion in those low budget 3 seconds than in the entirety of this film. I think the two characters that suffer the worst from this limitation are Timon and Scar. Scar's facial expressions would highlight his scheming and deceitful personality, now just reduced to a blank face. Timon's exaggerated facial expressions would show off his loud personality and provide a lot of comedy. now reduced to this. Which is a shame actually, because for the most part I think the new voice cast did a pretty good job. Nice to see Mufasa's voice actor, James L. Jones, return to his role. And the voices for Scar and Simba I actually quite liked. But as was the same problem I highlighted with the Watership Down remake, it doesn't matter how talented your voice actors are, if the characters they're voicing look like stiff wooden boards. The emotion doesn't feel real, and the audience just won't connect with them. This effect is only amplified further with the fact that movement also has to be limited to compensate for the realism. No anthropomorphic hand movements to highlight Scar's scheming. Action shots of animals fighting or chasing one another feels incredibly slow and unexhilarating. You can't even have Rafiki jumping around and doing all these ninja shit anymore. Speaking of Rafiki, you know that scene in the original where Rafiki is absolutely livid in his tree after he hears about Simba's death? Well, you know what he does in the remake? He lets out a tut. I kid you not. He literally goes, "Yeah, your best friend is dead, along with his only son, and now Scar has taken over the kingdom with his army of evil hyenas, and your reaction is..." Honestly, at this point, they may as well have just filmed live action animals and digitally added in lip movement over the top, just like they did in the movie Pride.
We saw some lions.
Can't hear you, darling.
Is this really the best way to do this?
At least then you appreciate the efforts of taking normal shots of animals and trying to weave a narrative out of them, and the fact that, you know, what you're seeing on screen is actually there. Even as I was leaving the cinema, I could hear people talking about what they had just seen, and the general consensus was, it was okay, but not as good as I thought it would be. With the exception of one chavvy teenage couple I was sat behind who thought it was fucking well good. Then again, this is the same couple who, after seeing the trailer for the new Cats film, the guy leant over to his girlfriend and said, "I bet that film's gonna have a lot of pussy in it," to which she burst out laughing like a warthog. At best, you could say Disney was simply being lazy with this film, hoping that the nostalgic pull of the original would be enough to draw in audiences. At worst, they were being ignorant.
No, they're ignorant. That's ignorant.
Thinking that the 2D animation is such a dead and inferior medium that people would flock to the cinema to see their once beloved film, but now new and improved, reinforcing this idea that CGI is the dominant art form and that even the best of 2D animations can be thwarted if they're simply remade with modern computer graphics. I mean, if anything, it's more interesting to see a CGI film get remade back into 2D. Take the animated remake of Shrek for example. Yes, this was done as more of a joke than a serious box office release, but it's a shot-for-shot remake of the original, but instead using various styles of 2D animation. And funny enough, it actually works, because it's visually stimulating and brings something different to the original product. And my final thing I'm going to hate on this film is how it shares the same title as the original. So once again, if we want to search The Lion King, we're going to have to start stating the year of release. The Lion King? Perhaps I should have just called it The Lying King, because, you know, it's a sham.